Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Career Choice Series webinar on food and beverage law. The Career Choice Series is designed to give law students, young lawyers, and transitioning attorneys a general overview of a practice area and ways to position yourself to get there. The Career Choice Series is brought to you by the ABA Career Center, Law Student Division, and Young Lawyers Division. The Young Lawyers Division is here to help new lawyers navigate the early years of their career, and law students prepare for life after law school. The Law Student Division offers premium benefits, which includes access and savings to Quimby.com, discounts on bar review programs, up to $50 off West academic casebooks, and a legal ethics bundle that includes a free model rules of professional conduct ebook. You can upgrade to premium for $25 at abaforlawstudents.com/go premium. The ABA Career Center offers both career development resources and a job board for law students and legal professionals across all disciplines and career stages. You can learn more about what we do at ambar.org/careers. Today, moderating our program is the ABA Career Center Chair, Betsy Manel. Betsy is a business development coach for lawyers and law firms. She was a partner, deal lawyer, and rainmaker at Edwards, Angel, Palmer, and Dodge, now Lock Lord, for 25 years. Betsy is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, where she serves as a visiting JD advisor. With that being said, we'll let Betsy introduce today's panelists and get the program started.
Thank you so much, Lexi. I am very happy to be here to moderate this program. The career choice programs have particular meaning for me in that we have been spending increasing amounts of time over the past few years focusing not simply on practice areas, but on industry and sector specializations. My practice included a very, I'd say about 90% of my practice was focused on the media and communications industries. And so from my perspective, that's an essential skill, figure out how to source information and contacts within the industry as you build your client base. So today we have two speakers, two panelists who have as part of their practice a focus on the food and beverage industries. And I'm not going to say too much about them. I'm going to actually like to turn over to Will and Rachel the floor so that they can describe those aspects of their practice, but I'll introduce them briefly now. Will Burnett is a partner in Nutter, McLennan and Fish's corporate and transactions department. Nutter is based here in Boston, and I've known Will for a couple of years. He co-chairs the firm's emerging companies group, and he co-leads the firm's very well known and very successful food and beverage group. And I'm going to let him describe his practice and the practice of his group in a second. Will is also a leader in our innovation startup community, which is a significant presence in Boston, and a frequent lecturer and panel member at the Capital Network. And I'll let him go on about other things that he does in the community. Rachel Gartner, welcome, is practicing in Chicago at Loeb and Loeb and has a focus on intellectual property, advertising, and emerging media law issues, and has specialized in food and beverage as well. So Rachel, welcome to the group. And I'll now turn it over to Will first, and then Rachel to give us a general overview of your practice.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Betsy. So Nutter, the firm that I practice at, is a full-service law firm, and the food and bev group that I co-chair is really a full-serve food and bev practice group. So I'm helping emerging and growth stage food and beverage brands really through their whole life cycle, and really serving as general corporate counsel for all of their needs, helping them think through formation strategy, fundraising strategies, all of their commercial and operational needs as they think through working with co-packers and distributors and sales brokers, and then all the way on through to exit, and helping them strategize and execute on their M&A activity. So really cradle to
we're not going to say grave, are we?
Yeah, no, cradle to exit.
Cradle to exit. That sounds good. And you and Rachel have met in the food and beverage space. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Rachel and I met at one of the numerous trade shows that we attend every year, and really that the whole food and bev community attends. And we'll talk more about that as we proceed here. But yeah, that's
Okay,
how we
Rachel,
met.
thank you, Will. Rachel, could you give us a sense for your practice as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I do mostly intellectual property and advertising and marketing work, and I specialize with working with food and beverage brands. So when it comes to regulatory work for food and beverage brands, there's a lot of work to be done. Um, Obviously, brands want to know, can I put this in my product? Can I say this about my product? And so a lot of my practice revolves around answering those types of questions and just getting them the types of intellectual property protections that they need from the startup phase and as they move through the process of becoming a larger brand.
So, are there other areas in the practice, other types of lawyers who represent food and beverage companies that would be part of this general industry specialization besides the regulatory and the private equity
Yeah,
and
I mean,
corporate?
there are definitely other attorneys that do, recalls and work maybe a little bit more closely with FDA on
Hmm.
FDA approvals of, new ingredients and that kind of thing as well.
Yep.
The thing,
And
go
sorry,
ahead.
Betsy. And if you're a an alcohol or spirits company, there's
Right.
also the the regulatory aspect on that side as well.
The one other thing I was going to ask about this, and one thing I've noticed as I've done my own research, is that I've noticed that some firms focus almost entirely on a certain segment within the industry, such as, um, well, there's firms that focus entirely on alcohol. There's firms that focus on other types of beverages. Do either of you have a particular niche, or is that something you've perceived in your relations with other lawyers?
So I don't have a particular niche with respect to my practice.
Hmm.
We represent food and beverage brands across really the spectrum, from snack foods to ready to drink beverages,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
all the way on through to ingredient manufacturers. So there's no segmentation with respect to my practice, but I think you're right. There are certainly firms and attorneys that pick one particular subset of the industry and focus on that.
It's a really rich area for possible specialization. Okay, well, let's move on to a general sense for your career path and how you ended up getting involved in the food and beverage industry. Rachel, do you want to start us off on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career prior to law school at an advertising agency where I was working on out of home media. So anything that you would see basically outside, not traditional TV or digital ads for large alcohol brands. And while I was doing that, I was exposed to all of the regulatory requirements. Basically, any creative content that I came up with would get redlined by legal, and so I guess I wanted to be on the other side of things. So that was what prompted me to go to law school, and now I am on the other side of things. So yeah, but
Good.
so that's kind of the career path that I think I always, after getting exposed to that, knew that that's what I wanted to get into. And then during law school and then after law school, I worked for a few years at a boutique firm here in Chicago that exclusively represents food and beverage brands. And so I would say that's kind of where my niche started. And then moving to a larger firm like Loeb, now I'm still, food and beverage is still my specialty, but the firm certainly um, has other brands outside of the food and beverage space that they work with.
Got it. Got it. How about you, Will?
Yeah, so I've practiced at Nutter for my entire career, and I really sort of progressed up the ranks as an emerging companies attorney, representing startup companies, really across all industries, really industry agnostic. And as I, you know, uh, began advancing further here and thinking about ways that I could differentiate myself from others in the space or others in the community, um, I found food and bev as sort of an underserved white space where a lot of firms were representing very large players in the food and bev industry, um, but the emerging growth, the emerging and growth stage brands really were being underrepresented, and sort of identified that they were folks that had a very particular set of legal needs very early in their
Mm-hmm.
life cycle, right? They're,
Mm-hmm.
from the jump, they're signing
Mm-hmm.
pretty complicated commercial agreements where they're agreeing with a manufacturer, about who owns the recipe, who owns the IP related to
Right.
the brand. So sort of identifying that and realizing that there were significant ramifications if they happen to get that contract wrong. Uh, that was sort of the impetus for the practice, and we've been growing it over the past 5 or so years, and now we represent over 100 brands, really nationwide. So uh, it's been a
Just
fun
kind of
growth.
mind-boggling number of clients when I think about it. Goodness. Okay. On that note, what I'd like to ask each of you to do, and this is really illuminating for people, I think, considering specialization of this kind, is just give me a sense of what goes on in a typical day at your office. Will, you want to start us
Sure.
out?
Yep. Happy to take that one first. So as general corporate counsel for these brands, my day is putting out fires. It's tending to everything that they need, and sort of prioritizing what those needs are and making sure that they get dealt with. Um, Food and bev brands tend to have, mm, on the corporate side, a ton of touch points in their life cycles. Traditional emerging companies, you may have a lot of work when they're raising money, or when they're structuring an exit, but sort of in between there may not be as many touch points. Food and bev brands are always, they always need something, right? They're always
Mm.
tinkering with their branding and making sure that the trademark protection is satisfied, and they're always entering into very, like I mentioned before, very very important commercial contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that most of my day is putting out fires. I try to find time to um, do practice development, continually touching base with my clients and meeting new ones. At Nutter, we frequently hold what we call biz and bites, which are lunch sessions where we try to educate entrepreneurs in the community about the topics that they should know about. So it's a combination of putting out fires and focusing on the practice development aspect of being an attorney.
Yeah, I've noticed, I've watched your activities on the client service basis online and social media, and for those who are familiar with this kind of business development efforts, incredibly effective to provide education to your client base and your prospects. Rachel, what's your day look like?
So, similar to Will, I would say there's always those days where you're putting out fires. But I'd say mostly, when you're working with creatives, obviously we have an appreciation for creatives when you're an attorney, but they need things right now, and
Mm-hmm.
they want you to say yes to all of their the things that they want to do, and that's not always the case. So it's making a lot of quick turnaround. We're going to print today. Trying to talk them off the ledge, those kinds of things.
Right.
Being able to think really quickly on your toes, and fix things for your clients in a very short period of time. More recently, I've been working on a lot of endorsement types of deals and transactions, and those are also very fast paced, and we got so and so to say this about our brand, and we really need to lock this down today, before they change their mind.
Right. That's
kind of
that's
thing.
high pressure. Yeah, that's high
Yeah,
pressure.
so it's you're in a fast paced, very quickly moving environment, but it's fun, nonetheless. So
It's fun.
I would say that, and then when it comes to your just maintaining trademark portfolios as well, that those are a little bit of a slower day, I would say. So when I'm working on trademark work, the day is not as intense. I can chip away at writing, but otherwise you've got fire phone calls and whatnot.
Yeah, both of your days sound a little stressful but entertaining. That the
Yeah.
kind of that kind
True.
of mix of a
True.
successful lawyer who is hoping to get it all done in one day. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and ask you each. Um, uh, the word hate, I'm going to excise from everyone's mind because it's obvious you both like your jobs. But what do you like the most, and what do you potentially like the least, or see as a particular challenge that can sometimes be less than less than fun? I'm going to ask Rachel to start us out on this one.
Yeah, so I think I've always just been drawn to this industry because it's ever changing. You're working with some very, very inventive people, and people who are typically very passionate about whatever project they're working on. So, you know, that when you're an attorney, when you're in law school, even you don't always think about the ability to be working with brands that have this passion project going on and helping them to fulfill that passion. So that I think is what I really really love.
Yes.
What keeps me going every day with my
Mhm.
job.
And what's a little bit more of a struggle?
Um, just if you have clients that need, everybody needs something the same day. Um,
Hmm.
Figuring out how you're going to balance all of that, and then also your personal life, of course, right? Like we all have
Yes.
personal lives. We all want to make our clients happy, which sometimes requires you to put your personal life aside. And I always feel like that's just something that you sign up for sometimes as an attorney. Um,
In any kind of service, professional service career, that's the thing. The client calls the shots, and you have to decide how high you're willing to jump. But
right.
yeah, I had about the same take on things. Will, what would be your sense of this?
Yeah, I think right in line with what you both said, right? I think my favorite part of my job is watching brands grow from an idea uh, to a fully formed concept, and walking through a grocery store and seeing them on the shelves, right? That is a
Yeah.
super rewarding aspect of the job, especially if I'm walking through with my kids, and I can say, hey, this is this is something that I had a a very small part in making happen, and having those brands in my pantry at home,
Yeah.
and seeing my kids enjoy them. That's super rewarding. The challenges are the same, right? There is we represent a lot of brands, and it's hard to keep everybody satisfied all the time.
Hmm.
Um, there's right. I agree. Hate's the wrong word. It's just
Right.
it's a part of being an attorney. But I often get frustrated that I don't have enough time to make sure that I'm paying attention to everybody, and that's a good part of practicing at a firm, and having a team, working
Yes.
alongside with you, where you're able to delegate a lot of the tasks to junior folks, or to other colleagues, and so that's helpful. But I'm always, you know, I worry a lot about, have I put in enough face time with the client? Does
Right.
that client feel that I've abandoned him because
Right.
I've got an associate working on
Yeah.
this project. So
Yeah.
it's a constant struggle, and there's no right or wrong answer. And I think I've navigated it uh, pretty successfully, but it's always something that I struggle with,
Right.
and I don't know that there's ever a
I
great resolution.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that I think is for me was crucial, that was the development of a highly collaborative team that had expertise in the industry itself, so that everybody we dealt with at least believed that each of us understood their business. So we might not necessarily have been working with them on a sustained basis, but if there was a crisis and the key person wasn't there, they knew the other person knew what was going on, generally understood radio and TV and cable, and could cope. And that's the nice thing about having a food and beverage specialization that the firm supports, and not having to be out there on your own, as you say, to have other colleagues. All right, so let's go on to the next slide, which we're drilling down on what we can communicate to our listeners as to the sorts of skills they would need to develop if they wanted to build a practice in this industry. So I'd like to ask Rachel and then Will, what top 3 skills you believe you have to work in the food and beverage industry as a lawyer.
So I guess the first skill that I would say is you need to be meticulous and detail-oriented. Often you will need to, at least from the type of work that I do, you're going to need to review creative items, and on the surface they might look okay, but you really, really need to take a second and take a deeper dive and analyze just about everything that you see to make sure that it's compliant with the things that FDA says, the things that FTC says, the class action risks associated with any claims or depictions made. And you have to understand that it takes time. You might be reviewing a 10-second ad spot, which is seemingly short, but there could be a lot of content in just those 10 seconds, and content that could really mess up your client if something is put out there that shouldn't have. And then another thing I would say is understanding technology right now, from the food space, and also just from how consumers are interacting with technology, because the brands that you're working with are going to want to utilize certain platforms and put out media in certain ways that you need to understand how the brand is interacting with those platforms. So staying on top of technology, being current, not stuck in the Stone Age kind of thing. Another thing that I think is probably I should have put this as number 1 is be likable. Which you're going to be working in a collaborative environment if you're at a firm. I think particularly in the food and beverage space, I'm always asking people that I work with, my colleagues, what do you think of this? How does this sound? Because you need a sounding board in this industry more often than not. And when you can work well with other people, you can get diverse opinions and other things that are really going to help your work product. So
exactly, I would agree with that. Will, you want to take over on the top skills from your perspective?
Sure. So I think at the top of my list is an ability to multitask, and I think we've probably beat the dead horse on that one. That this is right. There's a lot of touch points on a given day, and being able to multitask and prioritize and make sure that you're paying attention to the things that need to be paid attention to is critical, right? We don't have the luxury of just working on one thing at a time until it's done, and then picking up the next thing, right? You're always each day you're touching so many things, and so being able to do that efficiently, to be able to do that effectively, is very important. Second, I think you need to have a pretty broad knowledge of the industry. I think there's part of my ramp up to become a food and bev lawyer included attending seminars and going to trade shows and teaching myself about the industry and reading articles and just staying on top of trends. I think it's the case that a distributor agreement probably looks a lot like any other commercial contract, right? They're structured the same way. You would expect to see the same types of provisions that you would see in any other kind of contract, but it's not the same. And being able to have an understanding of what they're supposed to do, what the industry norm for that sort of thing is, becomes super important as you're trying to add value, to your client and to their business. And there's a huge social component here as well. This is not an industry that you can just sit at your desk and expect to to get work, right? Nobody's going to come to
Exactly.
you. You got to go out and find the clients. So part of part of uh, part of my practice includes going to trade many trade shows every single year, being out waving the banner for
Hmm.
my firm, for myself, and making sure people know who I am,
Hmm.
what I do, and what I'm able to offer them. And that's how Rachel and I met. That's how I've met a ton of contacts in
Yeah,
my
that's where
network
the network, right?
in
Building
the
the
space,
network.
right?
Yeah. I,
And so the third thing, that might have been three already, but the
that's all
third
right.
and
You
a
got
half
another.
thing
Hmm.
I would say is especially for somebody that's working on the corporate side is drafting. Drafting is a very important skill as you're thinking through these contracts. The difference between one outcome and another might be a word, or it might be, it might be a provision at the end of a sentence. So making sure, like Rachel said, to be meticulous, but making sure that how to draft well to protect your client's interests, I think becomes super important here as well.
Absolutely. Um, I couldn't agree more with everything that each of you has said. There's no question that there's no substitute, particularly now. If you want to be successful in the industry practice, no substitute for understanding the business of the client, how they make money, who their competitors are, what the trends are in the industry, and making sure you show that knowledge in the work you do and in your conversation, your networking, your engagement. And there's no better way to do it than showing up where the clients convene. I'm going to skip past the next slide because I think we've all figured out the surprises, and go directly to a question that pertains to what we just have been talking about, and that is where specifically do you find yourself meeting clients and prospects? What are the sorts of trade shows that you go to? Which are the top ones, and also what do you read? Are there like Law 360 newsletters on this industry, for example? Rachel, do you want to let us know what the name of the conference was, in fact, that where you and Will met? And let's each take about 30 seconds on this so we can wrap up.
Yeah, so Will and I met at BevNet, which is a beverage conference that's hosted in New York in June every year, and then also in Santa Monica around December, and in the wintertime. And it's a conference that you don't see as many lawyers as you see brands. And I think that when you're looking for conferences to attend, you want to be mindful of having a greater breadth of industry people there and not necessarily lawyers. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you want to be meeting the brands. Also want to be meeting all the people that touch the brands in different ways, because then you guys can collaborate. As you've heard, Will and I both would put ourselves out there as food and beverage attorneys, but what we do on a day to day is very different, and in some cases would be collaborative, right?
Right. Absolutely. Building
So
teams and being at different parts of the food chain. Will, other thoughts?
Yeah, I think especially in this industry group, being out there and waving the banner is important. In addition to the BevNet shows that Rachel mentioned, the two big ones are Natural Products East and West. One is in Baltimore in the fall, and the other is in Anaheim in the spring. And those are big trade shows where there are brands at tabletops exhibiting, and they're there because they're hoping to find buyers and distributors and wholesalers
Right.
that are going to take on their brands, and they'll be able to succeed. We're there for a couple different reasons, making sure that we're up on the trends to see what's new in the industry, but it's also to meet new brands and to see how we can help. And I've seen law firms at those shows, rent a table and set up shop, and just sit at the booth and hope that people walk by. But in my
Yeah.
experience, that's
No.
not right. Nobody's going to stop at a booth and
No,
talk to a
you got
bunch
to
of
do the
lawyers.
walking. You got to do the
yeah,
walking. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what we do, and you got to go in with a plan. You got to know who you want to talk to,
Hmm.
and I've found that the key to those shows for us is is getting an introduction from somebody that you already know,
Right.
right? And that's why
Right.
it's important to build out that network, have great
Yep.
relationships, not only with your clients, but with other, other service providers like Rachel, like the brokers, the co-packers,
Right.
the
The
accountants.
accountants. Right. We both thought of accountants at the same
Yep.
time. Um, I you think the two of you have really done a great job of fleshing this out, and I couldn't agree more. I think everything you've had to say is right on the money. It certainly is exactly how I built my practice, and is exactly how those of my colleagues who've been most successful in sector and industry differentiation have built theirs. I would recommend to our listeners, if you just want to start to get to know a given industry, whether it's food and beverage or another, just go online and start learning. You'll find where the conferences are. You'll find what there is to read. You follow both of these lawyers who you've heard today. Look up their firms, see what they're doing as client education, who's reading and writing articles. It's very easy to do now with the digitization of our worlds. And I thank you both for being with us, and I'll turn things back to Lexi to wind up.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. Just for some housekeeping notes at the end, we just want to give a shout out to Betsy for moderating and guiding today's conversation, and a huge thank you to Will and Rachel for joining us and preparing thoughtful responses. And thank you for all joining us today. Moving forward in the Career Choice series in June, we'll have a program on in-house counsel. So we have another webinar series, the Career Development Series, where our upcoming programs will focus on staying the course in your legal practice, reverse interviewing, so questions to be asking the employer, and then leveraging and pivoting to take your legal identity to the next level. So those are on the second Friday of each month, so stay tuned. To get program updates and to see other updates, you can connect with us on social media. We're on a couple of platforms. And then to learn more about the board and Betsy, who help make programs like this possible, you can go to our website, ambar.org/careers. There's a leadership page. Get to know everyone. They're very talented. And if you have feedback for other upcoming programs, be sure to take our short survey at the end. Your feedback does help us with planning. That being said, we will follow up within 7 business days with the recording and PowerPoint. And thank you and have a great day.